Reykjavik, Iceland. I arrived in Reykjavik port on an Oceania Cruise. This was my third port stop in Iceland. I signed up for a picture-perfect Iceland excursion, which was advertised as a different kind of excursion, taking us to picturesque places that haven't been as popular with tourists. This type of touring appealed to me. It was pouring rain on that day, so the guide encouraged us to have a better attitude about the weather, since it often rains in Iceland. Later during the trip, the guide admitted that it was some of the worst weather they had seen in months, because it was not only raining, but it was very windy. Despite the weather, it was a trip through an enchanting landscape. First, we drove through the greater Reykjavik area. 50% of Iceland's population live in this area. It is a blend of apartment buildings, houses, and industrial buildings. After a little less than an hour drive, our first stop was to the bridge between two continents. It is where the Earth's tectonic plates shift between North America and Europe. From the bus parking lot, we scampered through the rain a short distance to a bridge that crossed a shallow gorge. You could see the black sand of the volcanic lava. Our guide said that our travel is not dangerous, but that we were in the middle of a large volcanic system. It was a quick 10-minute stop, and then we were back on the bus. We passed by an aluminum factory, which we were told is the third largest industry in Iceland after fishing and tourism. Evidently, one of the only things that is cheap in Iceland is electricity. It is all naturally produced through capturing geothermal activity, wind, and hydro. By the end of the day, I could see the powerful evidence of all three of these electricity producers. We drove by lava fields as far as the eye could see. The black lava, or basalt, is covered with moss, which is protected in Iceland because it takes hundreds of years to grow. Our guide said that NASA actually comes here to test Moon or Mars rovers because of the otherworldly terrain. Evidently, Iceland has similar mineralogy to Mars. The guide also pointed out stacked stones that sometimes look like people. We were told that hundreds of years ago, stones were stacked close to the shore to help fishermen get home safely because fishing is extremely dangerous in the seas surrounding Iceland. The stone stacking is now more symbolic, but still done with respect for fishermen. You don't see many trees in Iceland. The Vikings cut down all the trees to build houses and ships, and they are very difficult to regrow. Livestock and wind keeps the seeds from growing back. We drove about 10 minutes to Retkjanes Lighthouse. It was a bit of a hike up with the wind blowing strongly, but once there we were treated to expansive views from the top. Our next stop was Gunnuhver, which is not how it is pronounced in Iceland, but the best I can do. It is a highly active geothermal area of mud pools and steam vents. There is an interesting mythology related to Gunnuhver about a ghost of a woman that was laid there. The steam coming out is supposed to be the ghost screaming or complaining. It only required a short walk uphill from the bus to see the unusual active landscape, with the steam and sulfur smell penetrating your senses. The next stop was Brimketill, which is a small natural pool carved by wave erosion. This was the only place on the tour where the bad weather made it more interesting. It created more dramatic waves. Take a listen. We then stopped in the small town of Keflavik for lunch at the Kaffihús restaurant. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. The simple but tasty lunch consisted of a hearty soup and homemade bread. Since we were all so cold and wet, it was the perfect antidote. The restaurant sat right on the shoreline, so I ventured out after eating to snap some pictures. There was an old fishing boat with a sign in front of it that stated it was the first fishing boat in Iceland to be designed with the bridge on the front deck. There were also some fun and quirky buildings in the quaint town. We then drove about 15 minutes to two old lighthouses. We were given about 30 minutes to explore. You couldn't go in either lighthouse, but you could see how they were set out on this peninsula. I walked to both lighthouses and along the coast. There was a museum and cafe nearby and another old boat. So that completed the picture-perfect excursion. We headed back to Reykjavik, which took about an hour. Yes, the weather made it a more challenging trip, but it was still a worthy excursion to see the various sights and unspoiled terrain. Throughout my stay in Iceland, I kept hearing that if you wait for the weather to get better in Iceland, you will never go anywhere. I have posted additional videos on my 30-day land and cruise journey to Scotland, Iceland, Greenland, and more, which I have listed in the description below. If you have questions, feel free to ask in the comments section, and please subscribe to follow other destinations on this trip. For senior and solo travelers, check out two new resources, the Senior Solo Travel website and the Travel Facebook forum. I have included links to both in the description. And if you'd like to follow my senior and solo travel journeys, please like and subscribe. Next stop, Nuuk, Greenland.